Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guests are my friends, Deb Fortin and John Gregory Vincent. They are the co-authors of the bestseller Diversity and Inclusion, The Submarine Way. They're also the co-authors of Periscope, Putting Traditional Leadership in the Crosshairs, and the hosts of Surfacing Inclusive Leadership, a podcast that has now had over 100,000 downloads. And there's so much more to unpack here. We've had the opportunity to work together. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome John and Deb.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
It's good to be
morning.
here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, happy to have you here. And I've been trying to get you guys on this podcast because just for our listeners, we've had the opportunity to work together. Basically our core values are the same, to approach leadership through diversity and inclusion, which I think is very important. It always was, but it's more important today than it ever has been. But just for the listeners, and I'll go ladies first. Deb, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point with what's your entrepreneurial endeavor now.
Sure. So I started out in corporate America, working my way up in the traditional sense, but in the background, I was always involved with diversity and inclusion programs. So either organizations or companies that didn't have programs, I would start them, I would evolve them, I would create the change through diversity and inclusion that I wanted to see in the work environment. And I started to then write for a magazine, and I volunteered, wrote articles for a magazine, and really got more and more involved in it. When I left corporate America, I wrote the book, and at that point, we actually received a lot of attention from companies saying, what are you doing to sort of further this effort of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and decided to launch a company. So the Submarine Way is our company, and it started really from the popularity of the book. When I left corporate America, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do after the book, but it's been terrific. It's just been super, super exciting.
It's interesting, and I was talking to a young lady over the weekend that just graduated from the University of Georgia. So she had an internship, and she was like, okay, well, I've got 2 weeks at home in Asheville, and then I got to go back to corporate America. And it really struck me at that point. I mean, I was in the corporate world a long time ago, but it's a little scary to take entrepreneurial efforts or endeavors, but the payoff is great. And just, golly, the corporate world is so restricting. But John, for our listeners, tell them a little bit about your background, and I know that involves part of the corporate world as well.
Yeah, I probably most pertinent, Deke, to your listeners is, first of all, the Submarine Way is a pretty interesting name for a company. So I'm the submarine guy. I spent 20 years in the Navy, retired as a command master chief. This is obviously for your listeners and viewers because you know all this. So most of that time on submarines. Yeah. And then after that, I did corporate. I did CBS television, natural progression, navigate submarines, go sell television at CBS. Everybody does it.
Oh, sure.
So I was shocked, Deke, at how poorly leadership was done. It's been years, they can't sue me anymore, but I mean, it was just done very badly. It was like jump in the seat and hopefully it works out. And I wasn't used to that from the submarine force, where there's a real concern, huge inclusion, huge preparation, huge professional development at every level. And I was very surprised to see that. So Deb and I are both massive believers in talent.
Yeah.
We're not taught that. We're taught work on your weaknesses, work on your weaknesses. Well, we say stabilize your weaknesses and work on what you're good at. Yep. That's how you get great. Well, that's how the submarine force worked. It wasn't how things worked in corporate. It was, everybody's got to be well-rounded. You got to do all these things well. So I left and started a sort of a talent-based, very tiny company, our first entrepreneurial venture. And it got popular enough, so to speak, that the Gallup organization, because we use Clifton Strengths, back then it was called Strength Finders, we got on their radar and they actually came and said, hey, we want to buy your brain. And when you're a geek like I am with human behavior and talent.
You are not a geek.
Yes, he is.
When it comes to that stuff, when Gallup comes calling and says, can we buy your brain? You say, hey, I'd love to have my brain bought.
Yeah.
So I went and I did that, and actually was loving that career. And Deb wrote the book. The book blew up. She started the second rendition of the company, and I left and joined her. So those are sort of the most pertinent pieces of what we do. And I think along the way, we sort of reinvented how people look at equity and inclusion and diversity, because we have a very different view of it than I know we have a different view than the traditional view, so to speak. Not saying it's better, worse, but it is very different.
Well, it's interesting, and you and I have had these conversations, but so Deb, you were with ADP, Automatic Data Processing. So my first year in office in 2006, that was the first big economic development deal that I worked on. But ADP, in the first meeting with them in Atlanta, talked about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. And so knowing that we had a diverse labor force in Augusta, helped me sell them on that because they got it. And once the facility opened, diversity and inclusion, or some people think that it's just diversity is black and white. I mean, we see that a lot. And it's not, but you could go to their facility and you've got people with disabilities, you've got people from all walks of life, and it's truly, ADP was a great example of what diversity was all about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, that's where I got a lot of experience with building diversity and inclusion programs or evolving them into something more than, one of my big objections is always diversity and inclusion is more than a calendar.
Yeah.
It's more than February is Black American History Month.
Yeah.
It's much more than that. And so, helping to evolve those programs to be more thoughtful about, appreciating people of all types. As you mentioned a moment ago, people with disabilities, there's talent out there.
Yeah.
And if you can look beyond what's on the surface to the talent that's underneath, you can really drive inclusion a lot more effectively.
That, and we've all talked politics a lot, but that's always been one of the things that's kind of driven me crazy about politics, but it is what it is. It's not, advancement is not necessarily based on talent or merit. And it's kind of like who you know. And I see people appointed to certain positions, and it's kind of like, well, that person, there's no basis for them to get what's basically, lift up on the ladder. It's just based on who you know or whose butt you've kissed, to be perfectly honest.
All the time.
And that's we've talked about what you guys are doing. It's to embrace diversity and inclusion and talent. Go with the talent model. It adds to the bottom line, and that's what you guys, it's not like this is just a touchy-feely thing. It's real, and it helps to increase your business and the bottom line.
Yeah, there's definitely a science behind it. You can talk about this in more detail, but we've taken a program that's really common. It's called 9-Box, and it's a succession planning program that organizations use to choose their high potentials and then what to do, how to develop those high potentials. Well, we've made it more talent-based, not just performance-based. And so we've introduced that to organizations to help them select the right people. In fact, one community that we went into, they thought they were going to have to hire from the outside when they had a lot of their first-tier leaders leave the organization. And we were able to identify through 9-Box people all the way down into their organization that could move up, who could get promoted and have professional development. And they had to hire really the bottom level of people, but they had the right people. They just didn't recognize the talent that was there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you.
Yeah. Well, the fundamental principle that's gone on forever, Deke, is, hey, I'll just use sales from CBS because that's what I did. Hey, you're a great salesperson. So therefore, if you're a high-performing salesperson, you'll be a high-performing manager. Train wreck.
Yeah.
Because totally different talent sets. Sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't work because you're looking at current performance first and then potential, but you really haven't identified what the talent sets are needed for the potential.
Yep.
Well, if you flip that and you say, does the person have the talent for management? What we have found consistently is typically your moderate performers, individual contributors, make the best managers. It's just a general rule. We're both sports guys. You know, if you look at like Phil Jackson was in the NBA, so he wasn't a terrible basketball player, but he came in when the game was pretty much over.
Yeah.
Same thing with Joe Torre. Joe Torre played first base. It's pretty good, but again, not that great. But look at them as managers.
Yeah.
So their talent really laid with management. So if you flip the model and you say, do they have the talent for the next position, whether that's horizontally or vertically, you're going to get a much better product. The other thing that people miss all the time is the first question about vertical, you know, somebody being promoted, that most organizations miss is how about asking the person and see if they're even interested?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just love doing what they're doing, and you need those people.
Yeah.
But if you go, everybody should be thinking about moving up. So they kind of say yes, but
Yeah.
they don't really mean yes. So.
Yeah. We've had lots of discussions about this, and I share with people a lot that committees are cul-de-sacs where good ideas go to die. And I focus on,
Yeah, we have had that conversation.
yes, but I want to focus on building teams because it's, as you referenced sports, teams are based on skill sets.
Yep.
So, you know, a point guard is not a power forward. You know,
Right.
Everybody sort of knows their role on the team, but that's what I see, and I'll get back into I see that with a lot of different boards of directors where we locally, and I'm sure in other places, you sort of retread the same names, you know, when there's a huge talent pool out there. But I've shared with people that just because somebody can make every board meeting does not make them a good board member. You know, but I
think
still,
we've all discovered that.
yeah, but just that here again gets into the heart of what you're saying. Build your teams based on talent. That is for our listeners, these guys are phenomenal at advising on this, and that's the way to build. I mean, I think one of the biggest marks of a good leader is not to know what you know, but to know what you don't know, and surround yourself with people that make up for your weaknesses. As you said, we've each
Absolutely,
got
so
our own
true.
talents.
Yep. Very, very true.
Yeah, it's actually one of the most important premises is I don't need expertise in a lot of areas. I need expertise in what I have talent in, and then I just need to know your phone number.
Yeah.
You surround yourself with people that have expertise and talent that complement yours, which is not how we're raised. We're raised to be well-rounded, to be good at everything, and all you wind up is a lot of mediocrity.
Yep.
As opposed to being pointy and then just surrounding yourself with other people. You said one other thing that I wanted to pick up on, Deke, when you used the word role. Thank you for that, by the way, because it's a great set. People use job and role interchangeably, and they're not the same. A job is you come in, you sit at a desk, and you answer the phone. Why? Because you come very very tactical. A role is why are you answering the phone?
Yep.
You're the first person to set the stage. You're the first person that person calling in is going to have an experience with. When you position things as what is the result I need, as opposed to what is the activity. Activity is a job. Role is a result.
Yeah.
Then people start thinking. Then people start innovating. Then people start saying, well, how can I be better on the phone as opposed to answer the phone?
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you said role because it's so different than job.
Well,
It's kind of interesting. We were just reading an article this morning that said that millennials, those people born 1989 and after, are the most disengaged group ever. I think the engagement for millennials was, 31%?
It was 31%.
31%. So extremely low. And that their comment is that in the corporate world, they come in and they do what they need to do to get by, but they don't actually have a true commitment to the organization. And I think that doesn't speak so much to a generation as it does to how we don't spend time motivating and developing people's performance and talent. And that if there was more effort to really build that talent and to do professional development, there would be more engagement. And in fact, that group, there's also a statistic, and I'm sure you remember this better than I do, but
Geek.
yeah, there's a statistic around the fact that they need professional development to feel more satisfied
Yep.
in their jobs more than any other group as
Yeah.
well.
And there's some companies that are doing it right. And I recently had Gordon Lawson, the CEO of Conceal, international cybersecurity company that's headquartered here in Augusta. But their workforce, so many of them are in their 20s, and they have very strong work ethics. And I think so often people are like, well, millennials or Generation Z, they don't want to work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're
fair.
not looking at the entire picture. There are hard workers in every generation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's very interesting when I talk when we do either a keynote or some other work. It's funny that when you talk to folks that are in their 60s, they talk about those darn young people.
Yeah.
They have no work ethic. They just they're just there for a paycheck. And I said, you do know 30 years ago, they said the same thing about you.
Exactly.
And 30, I don't know if it was Socrates or Aristotle, but it doesn't matter, but a long time ago. And what they said was, I weep for the future. They do not standeth when I walk in the room. They do not, they drink from their wine before I do. Well, they've been saying this about young people
It was
forever.
Socrates.
Was it Socrates?
Yeah. But no,
It's just not true. They need to be challenged. They need to be appreciated. They need to be valued, and they need to be talent based. And then they get engaged. It's
and
not
they need
automatic.
professional development
Right.
more than any other group.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's easier sometimes, I think, to just stereotype.
Yep.
Sure.
And it's like I'm typical example I would use. I had James Brown's grandson on recently, but so most people don't know that James Brown was a conservative Republican who endorsed Richard Nixon in 1972. But I think people would assume, he's a black entertainer. He's going to be a liberal Democrat. But I think we've got to be willing to have those conversations and engage each other to move beyond those stereotypes. That makes for more successful businesses, more successful communities, just more success in general. But I know
And leads to inclusion.
But here again, so I was telling Wycliffe Gordon the other day that somebody asked me, what if Augusta was a food, what would it be? And I said it would be a gumbo, because everybody knows that gumbo wouldn't taste as good if it was only one ingredient. But I think that's to get to a point to, not feel like somebody else is the other, but having those face-to-face conversations and engaging them. It's like, okay, this generation is not so different than my generation,
Right.
but you have to be willing to engage. And that's what, the work that you guys are doing with companies is amazing, and it should be applauded.
Well, thank you. It's us and them, right? And when we talk about us and them, we call it the virtual or the face-to-face cup of coffee, which is just another way to say the same thing. When you have us and them, you have this group going, well, they don't understand. They are lazy. They are not. Anytime you have us and they, what's really fascinating, you know this, Deke, what's really fascinating is when you take us and them and you put them next to each other and they start talking, they go, wow, you have a house, I have a house. You have an apartment, I have an apartment. You have children, I have children.
Yeah.
You've got challenges, I've got. All of a sudden, people realize we're not that different.
Yeah.
But if you stay in your camp and your echo chamber and only listen to the people in the echo chamber, it's always us and them.
Yeah.
And all right, I'm getting a little preachy, but you know where.
But I've always said that. I'm like, there is no us and them, it's all us.
Right.
And if we look at it that way, and the rising tide lifts everybody. So we're all in this together. But I've regularly shared with people that I don't see society as being as divided as most people might, because I really don't view it through a media lens. I'm out there interacting with your average man and woman on the street daily, and it's like, I can't really find extremists. But granted, I'm not going to where probably extremists hang out, or they're not the regular crowd. But I was talking to somebody about it the other day. I feel like we've got a nation. I spoke to a gentleman who's retired military this morning, who does trips with former military members to Washington every year. And I said, I don't think we're as divided. He said, I'm taking 50 people to Washington to the anniversary of the wall. And he said, and this was just this morning, he said, it's equally divided, Democrats and Republicans. And it's, diverse outside of that. But he said, everybody gets along, and so that's it's important for us to appreciate each other, but here again, if we don't engage, that can't happen.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, but so being, I would love, one of the things that you said to me, John, that's very poignant is that submarine crews, you were on a nuclear submarine, correct?
Correct.
The age of the guys on that, and that we've, with a group of basically 20-somethings, correct?
Oh, yeah, early 20s.
Running a nuclear submarine, we've never had an accident. Correct.
Right. We've had accidents as far as like running into things, but there's never been a nuclear accident on a submarine since the Nautilus launched in whatever, 1954.
With
never
an
been.
average of high school education.
Yeah, 80% only have an high school education.
And that sort of underscores our point. Okay, they're still 20-something-year-olds, as you were. Those kids aren't lazy, and they do a good job. They've got a certain talent level to do that, but I think that disproves the theory that every generation that comes after us is lazier than we were.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. If you look at a Trident submarine, for your viewers and listeners, a Trident submarine is the one that has the capability of carrying up to 24 nuclear missiles. And somebody's going to call in or somebody's going to leave you a comment. I don't know what he's talking about. But I believe every Trident that goes to sea is the 5th most powerful nuclear nation in the world.
Wow.
Because of the multiple independent reentry vehicles and things like that. The 5th most powerful. And it's run by 22-year-olds with high school educations. Now, these are people that most companies wouldn't trust to do an inventory in a storeroom.
Yep.
They're not grown in Petri dishes. They're kids from Augusta. They're kids from wherever. It's the way they're developed, and it's talent-based, and it's lots of, to Deb's point, professional development. And it drives me nuts when we don't realize the potential of people. Because, as you know, if we think they're lazy, listless, boring, and not interested, strangely enough, they turn out to be listless, boring. I forgot all the stuff I used. So anyway, if we challenge people and develop people and respect people for what they bring to the table, not what they look like or not what it's amazing what people can do.
Yep.
No assumptions. Show me what you got. Let me base it on talent.
And actually, one of our favorite clients right now, the average age is probably, wouldn't you say 25?
Yeah, 25. And those are the directors. Those are the senior people.
But they are incredibly engaged.
Yeah.
It's just exciting to spend time with them because you're going to get great questions, you're going to get great engagement, you're going to get a lot of interest in learning more.
Yeah.
Whereas some of our clients, they're certainly engaged, but not this kind of level where they're asking for coaching time.
Yeah.
They're bringing problems to you to just run by you and have you give them some perspective, a different perspective on how to solve them.
Well, and that's something to me, and I believe in cross-generational leadership. And I fundamentally believe, and that's kind of the point of this podcast on some levels, is that everybody's got something to teach us. Yeah. So I've had people from all walks of life from around the world. It's just been a very diverse group. But I'm hoping that listeners and viewers learn takeaways and get something out of every show, because that's what I want. I'm 54 years old, but I realize that I want to learn now more than ever. And I realize that I've got so much to learn, but I think that's, if you get to a point in your life where you're kind of stagnant and you think I know it all, I mean, to me, you may as well give it up. That's boring.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Surfacing Inclusive Leadership, y'all's latest success story, your podcast that's killing it.
Yeah, it was Deb's genius. For your viewers and listeners, Deb is the writer. She writes all our curriculum. She writes all of our speeches. And I'm sort of the talking head, as people are probably figuring out. Deb is quiet.
You're her muse.
I'm her muse. Am I her muse? I'm amusing. I don't know. Well, at least I think I'm funny. But Surfacing Inclusive Leadership, we just wanted to find a niche where we give people real tools that they can actually use with a little bit of humor, a little bit of sub-story and things like that. But I think the niche we found is Deb ties it to current events. 3 weeks ago, we talked about authoritarian leaders.
Yeah.
Everybody's thinking we're talking Putin and things like, no, we didn't. We talked about authoritarian leaders. We talked about Bill Gates. We talked about Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
We talked about JFK. Now, most people are like, Martin Luther King, but think of it. He had a vision. He wasn't going to compromise. If you were either on board or you weren't on board, he was an authoritarian leader, but he had to be, because people who have a vision, people who believe that what they're doing is going to make a difference, you're with me or you're not, which is pure authoritarian.
Yeah.
So Deb takes either a current event or people that we look at differently and turns it into leadership lessons. Because you say authoritarian, everybody would go, no, bad. Well, it depends on the circumstance. In a startup, authoritarian leadership is actually pretty effective.
Yeah.
Because you can't just go, hey, raise your hand if you're on, so, and then maybe you transition. So I think the success, Deke, is that Deb writes material based on what is a current event and how North Korea relates to how you run your small company.
Yeah.
And there are parallels. So
it's
I give credit to Deb, and maybe I had a funny story or two.
No, it takes two, right? It takes your talent,
takes us.
your facilitation talent, and it takes my writing and producing talent, and together it's been a lot of fun.
And for our listeners and viewers, I did not start at the outset by saying, you guys are married.
We are. That's right. Even to each other.
Even to each other.
Yeah.
But that's I would say it's unusual in the fact, I think my wife, Melissa, and I work well together. We, it's not a formal business arrangement, but it's always good when a husband and wife can have a good working relationship. And there are a lot of husbands and wives out there that don't want to have anything to do with working with each other. But it works for you guys.
It does. I think we had to get used to it at first. We've been doing it now off and on since 2014. So we had to get used to it. We had to have our roles. I think at first we were bumping into each other all the time on our roles. And now we've it's talent-based. He does what he's best at. I make sure that he does what he's best at, and I do what I'm best at. And then we complement each other, but we also have a lot of mutual respect.
Yeah.
So if I have a problem that I feel like he's the best person to help me solve that problem, then he's the person I go to. And I think it's vice versa, too. Oh,
it is. I mean, even in a small company, Deke, somebody's got to ultimately be in charge. We have an expression, everybody should have a voice, but at the end, just one person has the vote. And Deb has the vote. I make the joke it's 52-48, but Deb's the president of the company.
Yeah.
And we butt heads on topics, and we butt heads on how to deliver things. But at the end of the day, Deb says this is the way, and she's right. She's a strategic thinker. I'm a tactical guy.
Yeah.
I'm a delivery guy, but I don't necessarily look down the road very well. So if you respect each other's talents, you're still going to have disagreements. But if you stay in your talent lane, you'll complement each other. If I were to embarrass myself and try to write something better than Deb, it might be fun to read all the misspellings and all the run-on sentences and all of that, but it wouldn't be interesting. And Deb is a good speaker, but to be frank, she's not me. That's what.
And I'm fine with him saying.
Can we just stay here all day? Because I really don't want to get in the car after this. I was a little bit too spontaneous, but it's true. I mean that's a gift from God. I mean I was born to be on stage in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
Most people are terrified of public speaking. You're very good on stage in front of a microphone, but if I were to say, hey, let's just swap for fun. It might be fun.
It wouldn't be fun.
It wouldn't be fun.
No, well, I mean, and so as we discussed, sort of touching on the authoritarian leadership, every ship needs a captain.
Yep.
And you've only got one captain. And my father-in-law had a saying that with regards to marriages, the king is the king till the queen gets home. And that might be pretty accurate, but it's funny you talk about speaking. So I grew up painfully shy, and I'm totally comfortable in front of a microphone here or speaking in front of thousands of people. My wife, Melissa, who you guys know, she never met a stranger and is so gregarious. You put a microphone in front of her, she turns green. So it's here again, we each have our skill sets, but you've developed a strong working team within your own household because you kind of know your lanes and you know what you're good at. So that's sort of, you can share that message with businesses you work with too.
And we do. We model. There's no hypocrisy. We model in our own company what we help other companies do.
Well, it's kind of funny how quickly our clients can identify that. We have a client who says, I know that's Deb's, I know, but I was going to ask you what you think about such and such, but I know that that's Deb's kind of role. So they understand sort of what we do and what we deliver for them and what they can expect from us kind of naturally. But both of you, it's interesting, both of you grew up shy and love public speaking. So there must be something about how you overcome shyness.
You know, I've read that there are a lot of performers that are the same way, that maybe it's because, I don't know, that you're in complete control of the situation when you're not really having to talk with the crowd. You're the one that's talking directly to the crowd, but you're not making small talk. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating because, no one would say that John Vincent is a shy guy. I was horribly shy from kindergarten through high school. I mean, I think my mom, who just turned 99, I think my mom probably still has my high school yearbook, and everybody, doing this, doing that. And with me, it was a picture where I wasn't looking at the camera, and I think the caption said, I think he went to school here. I mean, I was invisible. I just was so shy.
Yeah.
I don't know, Deke, maybe there's something about that microphone and that audience where I feel that I'm just trying to deliver a message, and I'm connected. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I will tell you this, in doing self-reflection, I think the reason why I've always been such an inclusive leader was growing up shy, you knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. Whether or not you were one, and I'm like, the kids always gravitated toward me, but maybe that was my shyness or something, but I do think that makes you a more inclusive leader if you know what it's like to feel like you're not included. So just something to chew on.
Yeah. No, I think you've got a point.
Yeah.
Well, guys, as we get towards the end now, first off, where can people find you guys?
Everywhere. I mean, you can Google either one of our names.
You're omniscient?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
What does omniscient mean?
We're not omniscient, let's put it that way.
Is that like omnipresent?
But the Submarine Way, if you Google the Submarine Way, that's our website. But there's also a lot of other information there. There's our books there. If you Google that, Google either one of our names, you can find us. So those are really the two primary paths, but we're very, very easy to find. You can find us on LinkedIn. We both have individual Facebook pages, and our Facebook page for the business is called the Submarine Way Crew page, and it's an invite kind of Facebook page where people would ask to join, and then you can sort of follow leadership tips and stories about submarines. One of the interesting things that we found is that everyone seems to be interested in stories about submarines. So we always include those in our podcast. We include those, obviously, in our many of them in our books, but also in our training, too, because people are interested in highly unique leadership situations that are in an environment that they're so unfamiliar with, which most people are with submarines. So, any other suggestions on
how to find us?
Yeah.
No, you hit it. I mean, literally, we're everywhere. I mean, if you type in either one of our names, we're probably the first page and a half on Google, and the same thing with the submarineway.com. We are very easy to find. We're pretty voracious on our social media. Deb posts incessantly, and she posts good material, not promotional stuff, not We're Wonderful stuff, but real material. I try to make my posts on our company page on LinkedIn all about tips and tools. Be very consistent with the way we're going to do business. It's the same stuff. We give away a lot of intellectual property because at the end of the day, we're pretty altruistic people. And you can make a living and being altruistic. You don't have to start with the dollar. You can start with how do we help. And the dollars come. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's a business model. Deb's perfected a lot of strategic parts of that. So we're available almost anywhere. John Gregory Vincent or Deb Fortin. Did Deke say we were married?
I did.
To each other?
Yes.
To each other.
Yeah.
It's a fact. So as we get to the end, I always like to ask my guests this question. To both of you, what on a daily basis puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Helping people. for me. And there's a lot of different ways you can help people, but whether it's my family or a client, it's really helping people. So,
yeah, I think when you're in the public eye, and you can relate to this, mayor, speaker, but there's a lot more people that hear you than you really interact with, and you don't know. A brief story, I think it was LinkedIn, a young lady, no longer a young lady, reached out to me and said, "You have no idea who I am. When you were the command master chief at Corey Station in Pensacola, I, had been around for a while. I was reenlisting. You came to my reenlistment ceremony, and you took me to the mess hall, and you bought me lunch." And she had a picture. I don't know where but it was a picture of her and I after lunch, just standing next to each other. There's thousands of those stories. When one of those surfaces, it's so gratifying because for every one of those, there's maybe another 500 or 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a random act of kindness.
Yep.
I mean, I have no recollection of this.
But it meant so much
to her,
Yeah.
20 years later, is still a highlight. Lunch we probably had chili and a rotted sandwich. But the fact that I went to her reenlistment as the command master chief with a billion things to do all over the country, and I went to lunch. So I like when I find out, not from my own, gee, John, you're wonderful, but to know that what you're doing, it's really another way of saying what Deb says. When you find out that you actually help somebody, I don't know of a better feeling.
Yep.
So
I completely agree. But I'm surprised that nobody has answered that question with puppies.
Oh, okay.
I'm still waiting on that.
There's Miley and Rufus who will yell at us when we get home here after this.
Well, you guys have been awesome guests. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for
and
having us.
look forward to having you back.
Good to be here, man. Thanks.
That's all we got today. Dropping the mic, and we are out.